Good morning, everyone. I'd like to go back in time and have a look at travel restrictions, what this government has said, and what this government has done in the past, and then up till today, right? Like, we're under heavy travel restrictions, you and me, and the travel restrictions are being imposed from the municipal governments, backed up with fines, from the provincial governments, backed up with emergency orders and fines, and from the federal government with the quarantine orders for new people arriving to Canada, and basically and threatening to use the Emergencies Act if the provinces didn't enforce having people stay in their homes. So, with all of that said, from where we were to where we are, a lot has happened. And south of the border, Donald Trump yesterday was talking about rules to open up the economy, how to do that, how the states will be in charge, and we'll hear that too. So first, though, let's go back in time. Here we go. Back to February 2nd, 2020. City News is reporting Trudeau cautions against anti-Chinese sentiment as fears grow over new coronavirus. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is warning against a rise of racism towards the Chinese community as the new coronavirus continues to worry some Canadians. At a Lunar New Year event in Toronto on Saturday, Trudeau said anti-Chinese sentiments are not welcome in Canada. Quote, "Let me be clear, there's no place in our country for discrimination driven by fear or misinformation," he said. "This is not something Canadians will ever stand for." So far in Canada, there have been 4 confirmed cases of the Wuhan coronavirus. Isn't that racist? Which has infected almost 10,000 people globally in the last 2 months. A number of countries are moving to bar entry to people who may have visited China in the past 2 weeks, closing borders and canceling flights. There have also been reports of restaurants in South Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, and Vietnam that have refused to accept Chinese customers. Hold on a second. Did you guys see this? Did you guys see this report on Tuesday, April 14th? This is Metro UK, and it says McDonald's refused to serve black people in China and blamed coronavirus. The restaurant is one of many businesses in the city of Guangzhou to have recently barred black people who have also reportedly faced systemic police harassment. The city's large population of African migrants have long complained of discrimination, but many say they are now perceived as disproportionately likely to carry the virus without showing symptoms. Isn't that strange that everybody's there? Canada, the Canadian news is saying, "Oh, all this racism exists against Asians," and yet, right? Isn't that so strange? Back to this. Protests have broken out in Indonesia demanding the removal of Chinese hotel guests. Newspapers in France and Australia have been criticized for racist headlines, and Chinese and other Asians in Europe and New Zealand are also complaining of racial discrimination. Right? Yes, that's the most important thing. Fast forward to the next day, February 3rd, China praises Canada, slams US over coronavirus response. Do you remember this? I reported on this at the time. Canada was praised for not following the US's example of enacting a travel ban in light of the coronavirus outbreak by a spokesperson for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Monday. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Cheng, sorry if I got that wrong, took questions during an online press conference from international media in regards to the coronavirus and rebuked the US's response to the outbreak, claiming they had overreacted according to the translated script. Most countries, quote, "Most countries appreciate and support China's efforts to fight against the novel coronavirus, and we understand and respect them when they adopt or enhance quarantine measures at border entry," Hua said. But in the meantime, some countries, the US in particular, have inappropriately overreacted. Really? So when Donald Trump said that he was called racist by absolutely everybody for enacting early border measures, and then was blamed for not acting boldly enough early enough. What did he know? When did he know it? Right? The press is not your friend. They're not trying to help you and inform you. They are just trying to spin whatever narrative of the day. And they're not even consistent narratives. Usually they're playing counter to each other, or they're just trying to cause division, right? Like, you could argue this aspect of the article, or you could argue this aspect of the article. And what are you going to do, right? Like, there are leftist people who will just share a sentence of an article just because they think it backs up what they think. And people on the right too. I'm sure that I've been guilty of sharing a link or two and trolling just to get a rise out of people, but or claiming that it backs up my point when really it'll just make them even more angry. But that's the internet sometimes, right? Like, that's Discord. That's how things work. But it's really interesting to see like March 11th, fast forward to March 11th, right? February, it's racist. February, China is praising Canada and saying, "Oh, those horrible people in the United States are overreacting. It's not that big a deal, right? Not that big a deal. Low risk to Canadians, except for, oh, you meant your economy? Oh, well, there's not a low risk to that. Everybody will have to stay in their house. But other than that, right? Anyway, February 11th, research supports Canada's decision to reject coronavirus travel ban. Research. When the WHO declared a public health emergency over the outbreak of a novel coronavirus, the agency's Director General entreated the world, don't impose travel restrictions on people from China. The next day, the United States announced it would close borders to foreign nationals who had traveled to China within the past 14 days. Other countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and Singapore among them, quickly imposed travel bans of their own. But not Canada. The federal government, in a move that drew praise from Chinese officials, has decided to follow the WHO's advice because, quote, there isn't evidence that travel bans effectively contain viral outbreaks, according to Health Minister Patty Haydu. How are you enjoying your travel restrictions? You know, the travel restrictions of you must not leave your house unless it's absolutely essential. How are you enjoying that in the context of planes continuing to land in Canada from China? Yeah, that's good. That's okay with you? You think that Justin Trudeau has handled this and his cabinet have handled this well? I think that that's insane. I think that if you think that, that's crazy. These people knew what was happening. They didn't act, and they continued to not act. It's incredible. And they continue to put forward, with very little scientific evidence to back up their claims, put forward false claims. Masks don't work, borders don't control viral outbreaks, except that border of your house, though. That seems to be controlling it, right? Stay safe, stay in your house, wash your hands. It seems like a late 90s what are they called? Graphic novel, right? I'm watching The Watchmen again, but in real life. The talking heads are now me. It's very strange. Okay, back to this. Research from past outbreaks has found that travel restrictions can delay but not stop the arrival and spread of a new pathogen. Travel bans can also have devastating effects on the economies of countries struggling to contain the epidemics, which could make other governments think twice about immediately disclosing mysterious new outbreaks in the future. Travel bans typically don't work because if people want to travel, they find a way to do so, said Stephen Hoffman, director of the Global Strategy Lab and professor of global health at York University. That actually undermines the public health response because it makes it harder to track cases in an outbreak. Well, we didn't track the cases in this outbreak. It's community spread now. Anyway, back to this. Isaac Bogach, sorry, I forgot that wrong. An infectious disease specialist at Toronto's University Health Network agreed that in the past, travel restrictions have only slowed down the inevitable. All right. So the wisdom on March 11th is no travel bans, couldn't possibly stop anything. A week later, they shut the border. Right? Here's Donald Trump talking about the horrible mismanagement of the WHO. It makes you wonder, and this is April 14th, so this was March. Right, we're fast forwarding by a month, but it makes you wonder the alignment. Why are we aligning so closely with China? Why is every ministry aligning closely with China and demonizing Donald Trump for saying what appears to be the truth? China was cagey on this, and it's not just me saying that. We'll get to more, but here's Donald Trump. Here we go.
Today, I'm instructing my administration to halt funding of the World Health Organization while a review is conducted to assess the World Health Organization's role in severely mismanaging and covering up the spread of the coronavirus. Everybody knows what's going on there. American taxpayers provide between $400 million and $500 million per year to the WHO. In contrast, China contributes roughly $40 million a year, and even less. As the organization's leading sponsor, the United States has a duty to insist on full accountability. One of the most dangerous and costly decisions from the WHO was its disastrous decision to oppose travel restrictions from China and other nations. They were very much opposed to what we did. Fortunately, I was not convinced and suspended travel from China, saving untold numbers of lives. Thousands and thousands of people would have died. Today, I'm in.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, my microphone wasn't coming back. So when you compare Canada's curve and how many deaths we've had and how many cases that we've had to other comparable countries, we've had a lot more. Other comparable countries who shut their borders, right? Other comparable countries who aren't still landing flights from China. I've seen the stats online. I don't have time to collate those stats. If there's interest, I'll do that. I'll put them all together and show you guys what it looks like. But Taiwan is a good example. There are low deaths, low cases, under 1,000 cases, I believe, in Taiwan. I think maybe even under 500, but I don't want to misspeak. The last time I looked, it was under 300. But again, that was like last week, and this can change, and I haven't been keeping up with those numbers. But fundamentally, countries that acted with a closed border and travel restrictions from infected areas had less cases and less death. So it just seems weird, this alignment with China, who's not telling the truth, and our bludgeoning of Donald Trump while he's just... And this is just my view on things. I believe Donald Trump more than I believe communist China. And so maybe more fool me, but I think historically, believing the president of the United States over Chinese and communist regimes, that's been typically acceptable by the West, right up until now, right up until really recently, right? It seems strange to toss the baby out with the bathwater and start over with communist China. But I mean, you got to admire that basic dictatorship, says Trudeau, right? You can turn that economy on a dime, just turn everybody off, everybody stay home. And you've got those whole provinces of people in concentration camps. And yeah, China's a great place, right, Mr. Trudeau? Weird. And we're led by these people enthusiastically, apparently, according to the last election, right? Reuters is reporting on April 16th, Canada to keep border restrictions with the US for a significant time. This is yesterday. So at the beginning, it's racist to close the borders with China. And now we will keep the border restrictions with the US for a significant time. Canada's border restrictions with the United States will remain in place for a significant amount of time as the two countries fight the coronavirus outbreak, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Thursday. I scroll down a little bit. As we move forward, there will be special thought given to this relationship, but at the same time, we know that there's a significant amount of time still before we can talk about loosening such restrictions, Trudeau told Daily Briefing. U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters on Wednesday the two countries were doing well and added it will be one of the early borders to be released. Now, May 1st is roughly 2 weeks away, and I think that while what Donald Trump's proposing, and here it is, I love the picture they used for this. Anyway, this is the call. This is the governor's call. This isn't the press conference he held last night. This is the governor's call. So CBS News got the governor's call. And I'll play this for you. Trump really talks a lot. He must love the sound of his own voice. He's very funny with regard to kind of when he's off the cuff and doing this. Like, he's got something he wants to say, and he says it, and he's trying to sell it, and he's hilarious. Anyway, listen to this. I said yesterday he's probably going to give it to the governors. Like, he's not going to say the United States is open, because then it would be easy to demonize him with every single outbreak, right? So he gives it to the governors and with guidelines, which is what he did. Every state, I believe, meets the guidelines, so they can basically reopen their economies whenever they want. And, well, Trump says, you're in charge. So contrast that with Canada, which is supposed to have, like, the federal government deals with the federal government's issues, right? Top level. And the provincial government deals with services and administration and handling the province's needs. And so I think it's interesting that Donald Trump is giving the powers to the governors, and Justin Trudeau is threatening the Emergencies Act if provinces go off what he wants them to do. It's a stark contrast. Who's more free? All right, well, here we go. Here's Donald Trump.
We're going to be helping you. We're going to be supplying you as needed. If you need something that you don't have, that includes testing, that includes ventilators. It's amazing how that request for ventilators now has gone away. I say that respectfully because it's really been incredible how we have now thousands of ventilators that are being delivered. We have thousands under construction. We're going to build up stockpiles for yourselves. We have a big stockpile. We want to see it open. We talk about sports. We talk about getting our sports back. And we have guidelines. And you're going to call your own shots. I've gotten to know almost all of you. Most of you I've known, and some very well beforehand. You're very capable people. I think in all cases, very capable people. And you're going to be calling your shots. We'll be standing right alongside of you. And we're going to get our country open and get it working, and our people want to get working.
So I think that's the underpinning goal here. People want to get back to work. Here is and I appreciate Trump's level of handing the reins over to leadership in the States, right? That makes sense. with guidelines and with safety and all that other stuff, blah, blah, blah. I think it makes sense. Okay. Rebel News scooped everybody on this. Trudeau gave $830,000 for COVID-19 research to the same Wuhan virus laboratory suspected of kicking off the pandemic. It took the Globe and Mail an extra day to get there, right? So this is published on the 15th by Sheila Gunn Reid, and this one's published on the 16th. They roughly say the same thing. I'll just read this one here very quick. The Canadian government is funding a COVID-19 research project led by University of Alberta professor that includes collaboration with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the high-security infectious disease lab based in the Chinese city where the pandemic began. The government has given Li, I'm not going to say that, an analytical and environmental toxicology researcher at the University of Alberta, a grant worth more than $828,000 to develop tools that provide rapid and inexpensive COVID-19 screening tests in collaboration with the Wuhan lab. Professor Li and his team of researchers are also working with scientists from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to develop tools which would then be tested by the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Just send it over there. Yeah. The Canadian government did not explain why the Wuhan lab was chosen in particular as a research partner. A spokesman for Federal Health Minister Patty Haydu said all research projects that receive funding from the Canadian Institute of Health Research, a federal funding agency, undergo rigorous peer review by expert scientists in an impartial, objective, and fair manner, all independent from government. Oh, sure. And they just landed on that, the Wuhan lab, to give them almost $800,000. Yay. Through Chinese researcher in an Alberta university. I wonder how long before he's walked out by the RCMP, right? Just like in the Winnipeg lab, right? When that happened, right? I wonder how much money we gave to the Wuhan lab through Winnipeg. I'm sure we could look. I know there have been threads about it. Here's the last story for this morning. Sorry, I'm going along these days. Liberal government's almost humiliating posture towards China, a missed opportunity, former top diplomat. Two former diplomats are warning that the Liberal government's recent silence on China could reinforce the country's, this is April 16th, by the way, could reinforce the country's increasingly belligerent actions on the world stage amid concerns Chinese officials actively misled the World Health Organization during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. David Mulroney, who served as Canadian ambassador to China in Beijing between 2009 and 2012, said Ottawa's almost humiliating posture towards China in recent weeks was a missed opportunity to acknowledge the country's shortcomings during the viral outbreak. China has drawn criticism for providing potentially faulty information to the WHO, particularly in the first weeks of the spread of COVID-19, which in turn left world leaders largely ill-prepared for the virus. Guy Saint-Jacques, who served as Canada's envoy to China from 2012 to 2016, said leaders in Canada and elsewhere need to call for a full investigation of the WHO after it uncritically relayed information from Beijing observers claim could be inaccurate. He also denounced recent reprehensible comments by Health Minister Patty Haydu, who dismissed the claims about faulty Chinese reporting as conspiracy theories that originated on the internet. Mulroney said the recent silence by Ottawa is part of a long-standing instinct to gloss over Chinese aggressions, largely due to its tendency to retaliate and its growing economic heft, but an unwillingness to acknowledge even the possibility of China's misdeeds could sow public distrust. Ottawa can't seem to shake this tendency to flatter, he said in an interview with the National Post. I'm not suggesting that we need to insult China or provoke a quarrel. We should simply be guided by the facts, and right now the facts argue for the case that China was delinquent and that it wasn't transparent enough. That is not a conspiracy theory. I scroll down. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has batted away repeated questions about the WHO this week after U.S. President Donald Trump said he would withdraw funding from the organization. Then on Thursday, Trudeau came closer to acknowledging some of the criticisms of China and the WHO, saying there have been questions asked about the organization. But at the same time, it is really important that we stay coordinated as we move through this. So, and there's a bit more there. You can read it for yourself. Link is in the description if you're interested. But isn't it interesting, this alignment that Canada is moving towards China and away from the United States? All because of Donald Trump? Or is this some misguided attempt to have our economy able to be turned on a dime, right? Is this some play by the Liberals and Justin Trudeau to, I don't know, kowtow further to China? I'm not sure. But it's not just me that's shocked and appalled at this quick realignment, especially considering where this virus came from. Why are we still landing flights? Wouldn't you think that if there was enough for daily flights to land in Toronto and other airports across Canada, if there was enough Canadians abroad, that would be news? Wouldn't you think that? And yet, I don't hear any news about it. It's very strange. All of this is very, very strange. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful